everyone. It's wonderful to see people joining our session so bright and early on a Friday morning. We'll give everyone one more minute here as we start seeing our participants join, and then we'll go ahead and get started with today's session. I always laugh, we get so serious as we wait. Great to see some familiar faces as I'm going through our participants, some of our executive council members, other members of our EBC, and close friends. For those of you joining for the first time, a special welcome to you as you attend your first EBC session. We hope you enjoy our content today and are excited to learn more about our organization. Well, as it's 8:01 and I do see it looks like our participant number is starting to level off. Good morning, everyone, and happy Friday. My name is Lisa Baining, and I'm the Executive Director of the Executives Breakfast Club. Special welcome to all of you this morning, as this is our last official session of the 2019-2020 season, and what a year it has been. We were just chatting as we were getting ready. This has been an incredible year. Hopefully we will look back in 20 years to look at the history books and see how our world has changed, and hopefully for the better as we look at all of the different issues that are happening now. To start off this morning, I'd like to just cover a few housekeeping things. We do have everyone on mute for today's session. So if you'd like to ask a question for our speaker at the end of today's presentation, please go ahead and use either the QA option at the bottom of your screen, or you can also use the chat function. Wonderful to see everybody starting to interact in chat too. So I encourage you today to either ask questions, leave comments, interact with other guests here. This is part of our networking values here at the EBC. So please use chat just as you would if you were sitting at a table interacting with one another. As we start, I'd like to introduce our two interviewers today, the Reverend Dr. Dan Meyer of Christ Church of Oak Brook, as well as Mary Kay Slowikowski of Slowikowski and Associates. So good morning, Dan. Good morning, Mary Kay.
Morning.
All right. As we typically do at our EBC events, I'd like to invite Dr. Dan to give our invocation of the morning, and then we'll move on to Mary Kay to do our icebreaker for today's session.
Thanks, Lise. It's so great to be with all of you. I was about to say to see all of you, but it is a marvelous thing to be gathered together this morning. And I also want to add a particular warm welcome to those of you who are just joining this circle for the very first time. And so following our tradition, let me just invite us to spend a moment in quiet and in prayer together, and then we'll jump in. Let's bow our heads. Gracious God, we find ourselves today once again amazed by what life raises up for us. And in the midst of these very tumultuous times, we seek more than ever wisdom, the ability to see creative pathways. We seek a character of love and grace with which to enter into the relationships of our lives in more redemptive ways. And we seek, God, an ability to make a difference in this world that needs reconstruction, that needs refreshment at the relational and societal levels and everything in between. And so we thank you for this circle that is such a creative place of discourse. We're just really grateful that you've brought Jay to be with us this morning, and we ask that that in the conversations that will take place, that there will be something that each of us receives that is a seed that becomes generative in a wonderful way and enables us to lead better and live better and love better in these days to come. And so we surrender this time to you and your good purposes, and we do that in your loving name. Amen. One of the great things about these Friday mornings is the chance for me to see my friend Mary Kay, and I want to invite her to lead us into our icebreaker activity this morning.
Thank you, Dan. It's so hard to follow you. You're so good. What we do now is an icebreaker. What is an icebreaker? Well, this comes at the point of the beginning of the meeting where we try to network and get to know new people. And So we ask a question. Now this time, because it's virtual, we have to do it by poll. And I'll turn that over to Lisa after I'm finished, and she'll explain to you how that's going to be done. But the icebreaker question this morning is, how has COVID-19 helped your business? Now the key word there is helped. When COVID-19 started in March, I saw 8 seminars canceled for me. So right away, it was a hard time, and it continued to be a hard time up until yesterday when I finally got one back. And the way that I got it back is I tried to be innovative and not get down too much. Being in your own business, which some of you are, it's very hard to market during this time. So what I did is I went to clients and I said, I have 7-hour seminars. Let's bring them down to 4 hours. Let's go virtual. I will help you do that. And now another client is looking at 8 more to start up in July. So it's being innovative and trying to find a way that we can exist during this time. Now, what I'd like to do is turn it over to Lisa, and she will help you with the poll that we'll take on this icebreaker. Thank you.
All right, so good morning, everyone. What you should be seeing on your screen now is a few different options to answer Mary Kay's question. So when looking at how has COVID-19 helped your business, we want to see the silver lining and the good that has come from this. So have you seen increased sales opportunities? Have you been able to tap into new markets you haven't been in before? Have you had improved connections? We've been hearing from another session I attended just last week that the cold call is actually back. People want to have connections with others. Has your IT department had to modernize? I know jumping onto Zoom for several companies in our education system was a very challenging piece, but now we have that in place. Has it strengthened your culture? Have you made inroads into connecting with your employees? Have you been able to clarify your business mission, vision, and values? Have you looked at your strategic plan in that purpose? Or for some of you, maybe COVID-19 has not had any positive impact, and I hope it has, but for some, maybe this has affected. So as you look through, feel free to select different options. If you feel only one, select that one, but you should also be able to select a few different ones as well if you feel there have been more positive impacts. So we'll give everyone just a few more minutes here to consider that question and appreciate everyone weighing in. If you do have any comments, I'd love to see those in the chat feature as well as we look at how people are answering this question. If you have advice or you've seen something, as Mary Kay said, truly innovative that you'd love to share with the group, we'd love to hear your comments and weigh in so that we can share that as an organization. Wonderful to see how many people are weighing in on the question, so thank you. Again, these are anonymous, no one can see what you're responding, so if that helps the last of you jump on and tap into a few of those answers, that would be wonderful. All right. Few more responses here. I'm going to give it 5 more seconds and then we'll close out our poll and see what our responses are. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and end the poll and share the results with everyone. So as we can see, it looks like strength in culture and internal relationships was our leading one, followed very closely by clarifying business mission, vision, and values. And I know for our speaker today, Jay, this is something that very much speaks to your heart. So I'm excited to hear that a lot of you are experiencing the same things, and we'll hopefully be able to pick up a few things from Jay as well. Although I'm sad to see a few of you did say COVID-19 hasn't affected your business, I hope as we enter this period of economic recovery that I'm keeping my fingers crossed very quickly starts for everyone, that we can get all of our businesses, all of our livelihoods back on track and be able to help one another there. All right. So as we continue on, without further ado, I'd like to go ahead and introduce today's speaker. When I first looked at Jay's LinkedIn, he described himself as an experienced entrepreneur and also a serial self-starter with an incredible, unquenchable thirst to succeed. And one of the things Mary Kay and I learned about Jay as we interviewed him before today's session is he literally has entrepreneurship running through his veins. So I'm excited for him to share that story. Jay has had a wonderful career, either founding or leading several different companies. And as we just mentioned, very much speaking to keeping and building a very strong company culture while also adding to the bottom line. As we go through today's leadership journey with him, especially his story at TopstepTrader, it's very telling of the success that he's had as a business leader and also just as a human being. I'm very excited to have Jay here today. I think it is the perfect time for him to be speaking about his experiences with our organization. And so with that, I'd like to officially introduce Jay Rudman, CEO of TopstepTrader. So good morning, Jay.
Good morning. Thank you. I'm excited to be here. That's a very kind introduction.
Jay, I'd love to start us out. Just the very name of your company, TopstepTrader, is an intriguing one. Tell us more about this organization and what you guys do.
Sure, absolutely. Great question. So actually, it's going to be interesting to try to do this, but I'd like to try to get a little audience participation. Even though I can't see the audience, I'm going to kind of hypothecate what the results will be. So I'm going to ask everyone in the audience to actually raise their hand if they've ever traded a stock in their life. It could be on a mutual fund, a 401k, if they ever bought and sold Apple or Google, or I'm going to guess everyone probably has their hand raised. I'd like for you to also raise your hand if you've ever traded an option before, or a foreign exchange, meaning like USD versus Japanese yen, or a futures contract. I'm going to guess it's a lot less folks have their hands raised. And that's interesting. Like, why does everyone trade stocks, but no one trades options or foreign exchange, or maybe even crypto or futures contracts? And we at TopstepTrader believe there's 3 reasons why. One is they haven't been educated on what those assets really are. 2 is they really don't have the opportunity to practice in a safe environment without spending their own money in these. And 3 is they might not have the capital to do so, because you can buy an Apple share at a fractional price versus owning 10,000 barrels of oil sounds really scary and really expensive. And so that's what TopstepTrader really does. It really enables people to practice in a safe environment. And if they're successful at trading these very different kinds of asset classes other than equities, they can actually earn capital. So it's this really interesting convergence of gamification and financial markets. And what we do is, to bring it down to brass tacks, is we actually put our customers in a simulation. They practice trading futures contracts. They're practicing against live markets, and they're practicing against real-time data. So as the markets move, they see it in their simulation. But it's monopoly money. There's no real money involved here. And we are giving them feedback all along. Great job here. Try to do this a little bit better. You didn't manage your risk very well, etc. If they're successful at this simulation, we actually graduate them out of the game and give them our capital to trade. And so we have thousands of people around the world practicing in a simulation, no different than practicing landing a 747 at LaGuardia on a flight simulator, no different than doctors practicing how to do a surgical procedure in a simulator, but we're doing it in the financial markets. And the difference is if when you're successful at it, a few hundred of them, in fact, last year we funded well over 2,000 folks around the world to actually use our capital in the markets. And they're trading futures contracts and foreign exchange and options and those things that a lot of you put your hands down because you've never done it before. Now, where the name TopstepTrader came around, it's really interesting, is that the way this market used to work, for most of us here in Chicago, we know that the mercantile exchange is here, right? And the mercantile exchange right downtown, right past my shoulder actually, was a place where you graduated college in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, whatever, and you actually were a runner at the mercantile exchange. And what that meant was basically there were these big pits, people were doing all of their hand signals, people have seen that in movies before, and when an order was actually placed, the person in the pit would turn around, hand the ticket back to a runner, the runner would take that ticket and run it back to a desk where the actual order was entered. And then through an apprenticeship model, you would actually graduate from a runner to a clerk. Maybe you started to sit at a desk. Eventually, guess what? You actually got into a pit. And you got into a pit at the bottom level. These pits had risers in them. And the people who were the most novice, the earliest apprentices, were at the bottom, and they got money from people at the top who had been there forever. And that's how you started. And guess what? As you became a better and better trader, you rose up until you were on the top step. And then you were a top step trader. And that's where the name TopstepTrader came about.
Love it. Love it. Excellent. Thank you. We always have a pre-interview. You heard Lisa say it, and I would like to tell all those new people that are joining with us today. We sit down with our person that we're going to interview. We come up with questions that have come from our council. And so then we come here and we are ready, we think, right, Lisa? Who knows? I don't know. But anyway,
Yes.
it sounds good. Can you tell us, Jay, because we both talked about it. I come from an entrepreneur family, and I'm an entrepreneur. I mean, my mother was one. We did different things, but she was an entrepreneur. And you too come from an entrepreneur family. So you were almost destined to go into your own business. Can you tell us about that?
You put it in a very kind way of destined. I call it ignorance. I didn't know you weren't supposed to be an entrepreneur. My grandfather was an entrepreneur. My father was an entrepreneur. My stepfather was an entrepreneur. I didn't know there were other options out there. They all ran small businesses. And the beauty of the small business in the entrepreneurial world, and not to romanticize it or think, very Norman Rockwell about this, but they would come home and you would hear about their daily activities. You would hear about the challenges associated with their business. You would hear about their customers and whatever else, because they brought their work home, not necessarily on a laptop because that didn't exist at the time, but in terms of stories and emotions and feelings and successes and frustrations, etc. And so somehow, some way, probably through osmosis, that just became who I was and became part of my DNA. And so actually it was I grew up in St. Louis in a very large high school, thousands of kids. I remember going to my guidance counselor and saying, I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to go to a business school. They said, well, there's one business school out there that I'm aware of, and it was Wharton, the University of Pennsylvania. I said, okay, that's where I'm going. And fortunately I got in there and, the journey began.
Excellent.
And entrepreneurship is pretty glamorous in American culture. Do you feel like how would you describe it in terms of risk, and talk about your own feelings about the subject of risk as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, you're right. That's a great question, Dan, because people think that it is probably the most risky proposition out there. And I would actually be the contrarian in that. And I'd say it's probably the least risky, because you are putting your own capital and your own livelihood at risk. And to do that is probably you're only going to step into that endeavor if you feel as if there's going to be a great return in there. And you only will do that if you try to mitigate the risk as much as possible. And that's why you hear about, the proverbial garage business, right? You start in a garage, you sweat through the midnight oil, or you're working on the weekends. It's because you're trying to de-risk, because you're keeping your day job, or you're keeping, your other livelihood available as you work on your entrepreneurial endeavor. In fact, I think Lisa mentioned that I, try to give back to the community as much as possible. I do that through a lot of mentoring. And I get a lot of young entrepreneurs who basically said, I have an idea, I want to go do something, I'm ready to quit my job. I say, no, don't. You want to take your entrepreneurial idea as far as possible until you're literally at the breaking point where you can't do your day job and your entrepreneurial night job. And then and only then do you kind of pull the ripcord and move on, because you're trying to take it as far as possible before you're ready to move into it full onslaught. And when I say that, that's why I believe that actually entrepreneurialism is actually very low risk proposition because you've already walked through all the scenarios prior to actually jumping in full force.
I love that because when my husband joined me in our business, he was working full-time at McDonald's and had a big, big job. And he started this part-time training. And one day McDonald's called him and they said, we want you to be in Texas tomorrow. And he said, I can't, I have a seminar. And I thought, oh God, Norv, don't say that, you know. But it was the beginning of the end. You know, he had to then step away from full-time and into part-time because it was there for him. I love how you described that. Next, we always start with our pre-interview trying to find out about your childhood. And you kind of said it was very even-keeled. But then if you don't mind, you did talk about parents divorcing in high school. And since my grandson is going through that, I said to you, it's very hard on him. And I just wondered, talk about the even keel, but then get into what happened to you in high school. How did you handle that?
Yeah, no problem. Actually, the divorce occurred when I was leaving high school into college. And you're correct. I definitely had an even-keeled childhood. I think that definitely imbues itself in how I operate my businesses in a very even-keeled manner. And I know we'll get to that in the future. But, you know, the divorce is an interesting concept, especially at that point in time of my life, in that I was moving from, you know, childhood into young adult. And as I mentioned, you know, I was going away to school. I kind of had an understanding of what I wanted to be when I grew up, which was this concept of entrepreneurial, but no idea really what that meant. And the divorce was actually an interesting concept because what it did is it basically did cut that cord. It basically said, Jay, you're not going back. You're moving on. You're ready to move forward.
What?
There's obviously the challenges associated with, you know, the emotional and the familial and, you know, how to handle all the surrounding circumstances from afar. But fortunately, both my parents found their second loved ones and moved on in their life. And that made me very happy as well, because I knew there was some stability behind me. But by basically moving into, you know, the college and then early career life with post-divorce parents, which a number of you have gone through, I don't want to, you know, suggest that it's unique to, you know, the audience here, but it definitely motivated me to say, okay, it's time for you to grow up and actually, you know, start your life.
Good for you, and you sure did. Grow up well.
Thank you. Thank you.
That is almost identical to my story too. As I was going into college too, Jay. So
yeah,
it is.
It causes you to grow up quickly. So, and you realize that you have to forge your own path, and it's no longer possible to, you know, live in the wake of your parents.
Yeah. You know, the pathway that we go through in life is there's almost nothing wasted along it, it seems, if you look back and reflect on how it has shaped you. I know that that some of the key leadership moments of your life and the shaping influences happened through a company called Paperly.
Correct.
Would you describe that season and what emerged out of that for you?
Yeah, so Paperly was the business that I was in prior to TopstepTrader. So this was in the 2006 to 2013 timeframe, approximately 2014 timeframe, just to put some parameters around it. My wife actually was in the bricks and mortar business. She had a stationery and personalized gift store, excuse me, and she would receive a number of calls almost weekly from predominantly women, but men too, around the country who said, I too have a DIY belief. I have a craft. I really enjoy, you know, creating and sharing, and I wish to kind of enter your industry. How do I go about doing so? So there's kind of that as the backstory. And we said, well, how do we replicate her business? We thought about, you know, franchising as one option, but the franchise laws in all 50 states is a brutal experience, if any of you have been through that. We thought about opening multiple units under the same brand, also a very big challenge because of capital. And we thought about this online concept. And the beauty of online is the following. You have Amazon, you have Walmart, you have Target, you have all these big box stores, but they cannot personalize products. You can buy something that is already in a package and they can ship it to you incredibly well, but they can't personalize it. So Paperly was really the belief system that we can do the same thing that Amazon and Target and Walmart and all the others were doing, but we are going to take something that starts off as blank stock. So think of something that's white. We're going to put a color on it. We're going to put a font on it. We're going to put a design on it. And it's going to be personalized to Dan or Mary Kay or Lisa or anyone that's listening to this. And that is a really elegant solution, especially when you think about the operational side of that. I can have one central facility. This central facility can have literally blank stocks of everything from iPhone cases to coffee mugs to stationery to you name it. It's all blank. We get an order, and literally within 24 hours, I can personalize it to whatever your request is and ship it out to you. And so we can actually take on both the Amazons and the Walmarts and the Targets of the world, plus satisfy the requests from all these individuals who are saying, I want to be in the craft world. I want to be in the gift world. I want to be basically turn my world into a business opportunity. And so we started a business called Paperly, which did that exactly. And we decided to pursue initially, the initial belief was let's do it through what's called the direct selling model. And I know Mary Kay was involved with this. A lot of people know this world from Tupperware and Avon and, you know, Mary Kay and others like that, where you have basically a number of, again, predominantly women, but there's no reason to believe men weren't in this business, who are selling through at-home parties. And that worked out really well for us because in a suburban environment on a Thursday night at 8 o'clock, you can gather your neighbors, you can share a lot of the wonderful gifts that we made available through Paperly. The individual rep would take that order, place it online, and literally within 24 to 48 hours, we'd be shipping it to the end user. So sounds elegant. We grew that across all, against 41 states. We had 600 reps. I eventually sold that business to the ex-CEO of Mary Kay Cosmetics, who took my business and a few other businesses, rolled us up and took us public. But here's the rub, and this is going to be, you know, a great lesson for everyone who's listening in here, is that, as I said, I had a centralized facility, I had blank stock, I could customize things. When that product was received by the end user and they opened that box and they were extremely excited to see their personalized product with their name on it, their font on it, their design on it, their colors on it, and it was wrong because maybe they misspelled the name, or maybe they put the wrong product in, or maybe the color blue, they thought it was going to be royal and it should have been sky because they saw it on the screen and it didn't really match their expectation. And so that was the big lesson learned for me with Paperly, was that I had a centralized facility creating personalized products, but I didn't own the quality of it.
Right.
Someone else did. I had vendors out there that were doing this for me. Even if I put a QA person in there, even if I had my own rep in there, even if there were so many things to play with, quality and product was everything in Paperly. And if it's Christmas time and you're opening it up on Christmas Day and it's wrong, boy, did our phones ring off the hook. And so that was a huge challenge, and I vowed never to allow quality to suffer in any of my offerings or products thereafter.
I think you and I talked because we had something in common, that I ran a direct selling company too in our company for about 8 years, and I thought that was the finest time of my life. And you said something. You said it's the biggest people. What did you say before? Why it's so great to run direct selling?
Yeah, direct selling. So the downside that I learned was about quality. The upside, which I did not speak to, but you and I spoke of earlier, is that it teaches you how to motivate and incentivize people, because you have a distributed volunteer workforce. So I had 600 reps in 41 states, 4 time zones, and you are trying to motivate them to get out there and try to sell product. And it's volunteerism. And again, I'm not trying to stereotype, but it's often suburban moms who have, you know, young children who basically are doing this in the evenings, and how to create a culture of their desire to participate, that they're eager, that they're excited, that they're enthusiastic to be part of this. And it's all about connections. And that's why, you know, in the negative sense, people think about these as pyramids, right? That there's always some kind of scheme about it. But in the positive sense, a pyramid really basically says you are learning from a mentor. You are learning from a leader. And that's how these organizations actually grow is that basically, you know, Mary Kay might be a leader in her area and others learn and model from what Mary Kay does as best behaviors and best practices. And they take that back and actually imbue those within their own world when they're trying to sell. And it really becomes a wonderful way for education, for learning and development to work in this cascading waterfall methodology. And I love that business because of the people aspect of it, the learning aspect of it, and the culture aspect of it.
Right. Me too. Dan, do you want me to go ahead and do the next one? It's number 5, kind of, or would you like to take it as you have
go
started?
right ahead, Mary Kay.
Pardon me?
You are welcome.
Oh, good. That's the first time you've been nice about me taking the question in 20 years. Okay. As you have started multiple successful companies, along with selling them, you shared that it really can be tough to exit your business. That's interesting. How did one of your businesses exits affect you as a leader? And what would you have done differently? Thanks, Dan.
Yeah, I've had, knock on wood, the good fortune of exiting 3 different businesses. My first business was a .com that I sold to a business that eventually became part of Amazon. My second business was a market research business that I sold to a publicly traded New York business in the market research, and then Paperly, which I expressed, I sold to the ex-CEO of Mary Kay. And I have learned over time that, again, using that word I used earlier, it's romanticized in the paper. It's a big belief system that, hey, I exited and I have this hoard of cash and everything's going to be great. It is an absolutely brutal process. Wow. And the process is not the mechanics of it. Yes, there's attorneys and there's, you know, all sorts of, you know, phone calls and meetings and, you know, the process itself is tough, but I'm talking about the emotion behind it. You as the leader have developed a baby, right? You've created a baby and now you're basically saying, I'm trying to sell my baby. I'm trying to give you something that I love. And I mean, the metaphor works perfectly. Imagine trying to sell one of your children. It's like, you have worked so hard for it. And then not only are you selling a child because you love it and you're trying to, you know, reconcile with that emotions, but you have an employee base that also you have worked since day one to get them to love your baby as much as you do. And trust me, they eventually do if you're a strong leader, if you're a good leader, if you can communicate your story effectively. So they love that baby just as much now. And their uncertainty of, am I going to be able to participate? How does this impact my livelihood? Will I still be part of this in the future tense? All those things are incredibly emotionally. They think about it and you're thinking about it for all of them. So now you have your emotions, their emotions, and there's probably a family behind you as well, a significant other, children, spouse, whatever else it might be, who are also whispering in your ear and saying things about, oh, you're getting enough, you're not getting enough, you should also do this, you should try to do that. It is exhausting emotionally. And I will say you do not sleep the entire process. And so everyone that has a business and wants to exit a business and wants to, basically monetize all the hard work they've done, that's wonderful. And I strongly support it. And it's a great way to de-risk. Yet at the same time, please step in very carefully, knowing that it is definitely an emotional roller coaster.
Wow, that's wise counsel. You've birthed these 3 companies. You went through the process you just described. It's so emotionally roiling of passing them along to someone else. Your experience with TopstepTrader, we understand, is different. How did you actually join that company?
Yeah, that's a great question. It is vastly different. I wasn't looking for Topstep. Topstep found me. So a number of you might know the Junto Institute. The Junto Institute is a wonderful for-profit mini MBA program in Chicago. And the magic of the Junto Institute is something where they take small organizations that are looking for additional guidance and they match you with mentors, and there's a shared experience conversation that occurs at that point. And so I knew Raman Chandra, who basically started the Junto Institute. I knew him from way back when he was running the Coleman Center over at DePaul. And he basically asked me, hey, there's this company called TopstepTrader. They're struggling. And why they're struggling is basically their founder, Michael Patak, who I love, adore as a brother, and I've gotten to know very, very well, is a trader. And we know that traders don't necessarily have the strongest, I don't know, how should I put this, belief in the culture. They basically are a little bit more impetuous, right? Their job in the trading pit is to buy and sell as quickly as possible and, eat what you kill, essentially. And so the organization kind of had this really cool idea, but they didn't know how to really scale their business. So Raman, as the founder of Junto, said, can you mentor the CEO, Michael, to help him with his business? And I did as part of Junto for 9 months. And then post Junto, we continued the conversation. So it was literally the founder of TopstepTrader and myself behind closed doors, sitting across from a table, talking for hours on end for well over 15 months. Had never met anyone else at Topstep, had only seen it through his lens, had no idea what the physicality of the office was, like had never seen anything but Michael's perspective on this. All pro bono, by the way. Loved it, loved Michael, loved the idea, understood who Michael was, what the idea was, and kind of both the pros and cons associated with his vision. And then he basically said, why don't you start doing this with the rest of the management team? And Topstep at the time was maybe in the low teens, maybe 10, 12 folks. We're at about 53, 54 folks now. And I basically said, sure, Michael, but guess what? I got to start charging you for my time. I can't just be walking the halls of Topstep all day, every day for, I have other clients. I was doing other consulting work, etc. And so I started meeting with the rest of the team. And then Michael one day basically said, why don't you join the business? Because you're spending so much time here. And that kind of made sense. And I joined the business because I truly believed in the offering and the product, which I spoke of earlier, that we can provide education, experience, and capital to people who want to get into these markets. And I truly believed in Michael's vision because I had the luxury of 15 months sitting in closed caption with him, understanding who he was and what he was about. There was no skeletons in the closet with Michael and me. And so I joined the business, and almost instantly he said, can you just run the business for me? And I know I make it sound a little bit flippant, but it was a great conversation. He understood that I brought a great skill set that maybe complemented what he had. And we really play this great balance where he provides the vision, he provides the trading knowledge, he provides the energy because he's an incredibly passionate individual. And I can do those as well, but I realize my role at this organization is to play the counterbalance. My counterbalance is to play, to use the word earlier, even keeled, to bring the operational experience, to bring the scaling element of it, and to bring the practicality of how to really grow a business. And we actually struggled with that initially. Anyone else that's listening to this and has that kind of counterbalance in their organization, I highly recommend a book. It's by Gino Wickman. It's called Rocket Fuel. Gino Wickman is the one that wrote Traction, which a lot of people use as kind of their operating system for a business. But he also wrote a second book called Rocket Fuel. And he talks about how organizations need rocket fuel. And the way you get rocket fuel is you have a vision, a visionary, and a leader in that regard. And you have an operator, an integrator in that regard. And when you combine those two things, you have rocket fuel and the business will grow. So anyone that is struggling with, I have a co-founder or an operator or a leader that, just sees the world differently, use this book, and it provides kind of the guiding principles about how you can stay in your swim lanes. And Michael knows what his swim lane is, and I know what my swim lane is. And when we do that, it works magically.
Excellent. For those that are new to our morning, again, welcome. And this is the time where we try to get into a little bit on leadership for those that have been around us a while. they know how important this next question might be. We say that leadership is being lonely at the top, but you talk about it as a fishbowl. Can you give us what that means and about leadership?
Yeah, absolutely. You quickly learn that two things. First thing is that humans, and I'm not a psychiatrist or psychologist or anthropologist or anything, but you quickly learn that humans learn by modeling. You learn just as a child by watching your parents, as a teenager by watching others, as a young adult by watching your mentor. Like, you learn through modeling. You can read books, you can watch videos, but you learn by watching others. Second thing that you learn is, as a leader, everyone's watching you. They are all watching you and will model your behavior.
Yeah.
So when you combine those two potent ingredients, you quickly realize you're in a fishbowl. Because no matter how you perform, how you act every single day is just how it kind of infuses within the rest of the organization. And so you are in a fishbowl. There's really no opportunity for you to let your guard down. And I know that sounds horrible. It sounds as if you can't be your true self, but I'm actually suggesting you should be your true self. You should be authentic. You should be as trustworthy and as credible as possible because of the authenticity. But you have to appreciate that no matter what you say and what you do, everyone's watching, and they are going to mimic who you are and what you are forevermore. And that's how you have to build a strong culture in the organization, is it all starts with how you behave and how you react. And so it doesn't matter if you're in the kitchen in your office or on a Zoom call or talking to an individual during a yearly review, you always have to appreciate that what you say truly matters. You also have to appreciate that sometimes there's unintended consequences of your words, right? You intended them to mean one thing, someone else interpreted it a different way. And you can't really help with the lens that people, or the filter that people intake your words. The only solution I have found for that one is you have to over communicate. Because if you say it once, it will probably be misinterpreted by some portion of the audience. But if you say it twice and thrice and 10 and 20 and 30 times over and over and over again, it's more likely that the true intention of your words and your behaviors are going to start to sink in. And so you hear it all the time from, business experts about how to over communicate as a leader. That is so true. And it's largely because otherwise, sometimes the intention gets lost.
You mentioned situational leadership. I've taught situational leadership. Will you explain it to people that probably know about it, but some might not?
Yeah, I will be the first to admit that I am not, practiced in it from a classroom perspective, but I'm practiced in it from an experience perspective, meaning that I have learned through a lot of mistakes in my career what situational leadership is. And situational leadership is that basically at times, especially in this time, think about it. Think about what we've gone through over the last 6 months. It is crazy, right? Everything from, the COVID, shelter in place, to financial markets in my world with, historic volatility, to, unfortunately, a lot of unjustness in terms of, what's going on in our racial situation in America and around the world. All that said, your leadership has to change and ebb and flow given what is occurring both in the macro world as well as in the micro moment with that particular individual. And you're going to have to wear multiple hats for that. So to bring it down to answer your question specifically, is that at times you have to be the cheerleader and say, this is what we need to do as an organization. And sometimes you need to be, the therapist and listen and acknowledge and affirm. And sometimes you need to be, the operator and basically say, hey, this is what we need to do. One of the two words we use quite often around here when I talk about my leadership style is that typically I'm democratic. So I want to make sure that I hear people's thoughts, but sometimes I have to be directive, right? And those are kind of opposite extremes. I tend not to be directive. But when something happens that needs that, directive is absolutely critical. And the way we get that across in the organization is we have 6 values we live. I'm sure a lot of organizations have values. You talk about them, they're probably up on your wall, but you truly have to use them every single day of your life at the business world. And one of our values is empowered people yield great results. And so empowerment here is everything. And I will say to my team, I empower you to make that decision. I will explain the why, you do the what and the how. I will tell you why it's important, you figure out how to make it happen. But occasionally I have to step across that line and I have to say, you know what? Because of urgency, because of immediacy, because of what's occurring, I have to tell you the what and how. I promise you I'm not going to do it very often, but in this moment, I need to do it. And as long as you call it out and express it for what it is, and people will understand that it's a unique situation, I think it works well.
So you just adapt to the leadership style of the person you're dealing with.
I do. But I also want to make sure that people understand how I lead too. And I think this might lead to a question you're about to ask, but I'll answer it even before you ask the question, which is I try instantly to explain to people in my organization how I lead, right? So on day 1 of the onboarding experience, when we have a new employee join, we just had one join on Tuesday, I sit down with them, proverbially or metaphorically in this instance through Zoom, for 30 minutes, sometimes up to an hour, and explain a little bit about what Topstep's values are. They have to understand Topstep, but then they also have to understand about me. And I have outside the sign on my door, a little bit about how I lead. And it's called How I Work. And it's literally when you walk in my office, again, a little bit harder to do when you're in a virtual world, but there's a big sign outside my door about who I am and what I'm about. And it basically says things like, I ask a lot of questions. And it's not because I don't trust you, it's because I'm curious. And a lot of people misinterpret my question asking as, I don't believe you. No, I have a curiosity and I want to learn more. And maybe together we can, by asking a lot of questions, get to even a more optimal solution. I'll say things like, I'm a visual learner, is one of the things that my sign says. And what that means is that basically sometimes in the middle of a conversation, I will leave the conversation, grab a marker, go to a whiteboard and start, doodling. And it's not because I don't value the eye contact or the immediacy or intimacy of the conversation. It's that's how I think and learn, is by doodling on a whiteboard and kind of trying to draw pictures around this. Things like I trust data is also up on my board. So I'm going to believe your opinions, but you're going to have to support it with data. And so I have a bunch of things on my board that I can always point to. And if I can get that out early in the conversation, I think that builds a very trustworthy connection.
I hope Lisa's taking some notes on that. I'm sure you are, to help others. That's excellent.
I am taking an incredible amount of notes.
And I'd be happy to share with anyone, the how I work. I know that a few others have kind of done this around the organization and other places. So you're welcome to borrow it.
Okay, we turn it over to Dan.
I love that idea, Jay, and I really resonate with that vision of empowering people as sort of the key to multiplying the influence of an organization. There's a lot of conversation in the empowerment circle around mentoring these days, and I'm not always sure what people really mean by mentoring at times. Are there any particular mistakes that you've noted or things that you would want to correct when it comes to the subject of mentoring people?
Yeah. First of all, and great question, we should probably even change the word mentoring. I think it should be co-mentoring. Like, this is not me to you, and this is not you to me. This is us together, right? I'm going to learn so much in this conversation from you as much as you're going to learn from me. And so these should all be co-mentoring relationships. And just by changing the word, and I'm a big believer in words, changing the word is so impactful, because now it means that I'm not just going to show up in a coffee and sit here and try to listen to what you're going to share with me. It's that I have to engage. I have to be prepared. I have to have an agenda. I have to participate. because we are going to have a conversation that's going to challenge both of us, and we're probably going to both walk away with some next steps that we're going to have to come back again with in 30 days, 90 days, whatever it is. So this concept of co-mentoring is much more important to me than mentoring. So that's the first mistake, is I think people think of it as a unilateral discussion rather than a bilateral discussion. The second mistake is I think people, occasionally, this happens less so, but sometimes people think about mentoring as networking rather than mentoring. Networking is a totally different discipline, a completely different way to approach it. Mentoring is really about two individuals, or co-mentoring is really about two individuals sitting down and trying to have a discussion about, again, whatever that agenda items are. And then the third mistake I think that occurs quite often in the mentoring world or the co-mentoring world is that people try to tell you what you should do. Lisa, you should do this. I will say that this is what you should do, and that's a mistake. Instead, what you really should be doing is sharing experiences. What you should say is, you know what, I've encountered that before, and here's how I addressed it. And then you're enabling the individual on the other side of the table the opportunity to listen and basically mold that conversation into something that's much more impactful and meaningful to them that they then can apply to their role situation. And so they're learning from your successes and mistakes, but you are never really pontificating as to what the should be. And so the concept of shared experiences, I know a number of folks use this. I'm a huge believer of it. And I think it goes a lot longer or a lot farther in these conversations.
That's really good, Jay. Lisa, I know there have been all kinds of questions coming in on the chat line there. Anything you'd like to particularly draw out and make sure that Jay has a chance to respond to?
I would say, I know we were going to get into COVID, which actually I just had a question pop up, so I'd love to combine that with the question I know Mary Kay had next. But Jay, how has COVID and remote working really changed the culture of Topstep? I know that's something Mary Kay and I were curious about too, since culture is so important and not having that face-to-face connection is definitely a hurdle to overcome.
Oh my, it's been really, really, really hard. So we work, as I mentioned earlier, with Paperly and other businesses I've been involved in. I've made so many cultural mistakes, and I vow never to let that happen again. I've learned a lot, and I said with Topstep, we were going to build the most amazing culture ever. And the way I was going to do that was I wanted people to come into the office. Not because I wanted to, it's lovely to see people and the energy and everything, but I wanted to make the office so awesome that people wanted to be here. And you do that through culture. And we did that through all sorts of, the traditional ways of, free snacks and coffee and, an open environment. And we did happy hours and functions and all sorts of good stuff. So now all of a sudden we have to flip that. We basically said our culture is predicated on the desire. We had a work from home policy. So it wasn't as if people had to come to the office. It's just we made it so enticing that people wanted to come to the office. Now we have to flip that. So what we quickly did was there's really two things. One is that transitions are tough for people. And the way that you smooth transitions like this is that you try to bring the old with the new. So we try to do a lot of the old as well. We still did the virtual happy hours, which I'm sure many of you did. We did, the lunch Zooms that people could jump in and then jump out, to try to mimic a kitchen environment. We did a lot of the same stuff, but just on a digital platform. But those don't work incredibly well, but at least you're trying to smooth that transition from old to new. Now, what's the new? We crafted a policy called Work From Anywhere. And we basically put together a philosophy, and this work from anywhere is, we welcome you in the office, should the office open again. We welcome you if you want to work from home, or we welcome you if you want to work from the mountains in Colorado. We don't care. We just want you to be happy, safe, and healthy, and a key contributor to Topstep. And by spelling out that entire philosophy, which was just a one-page, manifesto about what our belief systems are, and saying that's the new Topstep, I think that really helped alleviate a lot of these concerns about where the Topstep culture is going. Are you going to force me back into a work environment that maybe I feel uncomfortable or anxious in? And I think that really helped significantly. And it kind of put us in a forward thinking or thought leadership, perspective on what to do with this. I will say it's still nascent. We're all still trying to figure this out. I spend a lot of time co-mentoring with other CEOs out there to figure out what the heck they're doing. And it's a big experiment, and I have a high degree of confidence of it being positive.
Excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Lisa?
All right, well, I am looking through, we've had so many great questions, so thank you everyone. Feel free to continue adding those to the QA or the chat options. So I'm gonna jump you back, Jay, to the start of our conversation and work forward from there. So one of the first questions we received was, can you explain your opinion on the difference between an entrepreneur and a wantrepreneur?
Yeah, I get that quite frequently. I think a wantrepreneur is more, the word I use is hobbyist. They want to dabble. They want to basically say, oh, I like, going back to the paperly days, I like selling gifts. I make belts. I embroider shawls. I make jewelry, whatever else it might be. I'm a hobbyist. An entrepreneur is someone who basically thinks, how do I scale this? How do I go from units of 1 to units of 10,000? And that's the big bridge and difference. And so when someone comes to me and we have a conversation and I'm providing some shared experiences and they basically say, I want to take my idea and bring it to the world as an entrepreneur, I say, well, tell me what it looks like at scale. And if they can't articulate that, if they can't tell me the economics, if they can't tell me what what the business looks like in terms of org structure or anything else like that, then to me, they haven't crossed that chasm of what an entrepreneur is yet. And it just might be because they hadn't thought about it, so I try to provide some guidance on that, but that's the big difference in my world.
So next up, we're going to move more into your coaching and mentoring piece. So the first question I have there is, can you talk a little bit more about mentoring, coaching, and masterminds in business success? Any thoughts on mentoring, coaching, and masterminds?
Yeah, I don't know the masterminds exceptionally well. I've not participated in it. I know it's a philosophy and an approach, and one I've heard wonderful accolades about. So I'm not going to be able to speak tremendously about it. But a coach is basically, think about it in the sports metaphor. And I hate sports metaphors because they, some people aren't into sports, and so it falls on deaf ears. But let's just use it for a moment. A coach is someone who basically is constantly standing on the sidelines and yelling at you as to what you should be doing in the next minute. So they're ever present. They are, even in the football world, the team huddles, the quarterback is there. The quarterback is not calling the plays. Coach is calling the plays. The coach is telling the team what to do. That is what a coach is. And coaching is important, but a mentor isn't there every day, every moment, and telling you what to do. A mentor is trying to provide that 30,000 foot perspective, fresh eyes, new lens, looking at the business and saying, here's what I've done in my business. I hope you can find something else out of, some learning out of what I've done that you can apply. And so it's a completely different perspective on how to try to, advance and improve your business.
All right, so I should say thank you, Brian, for those last two questions. I want to acknowledge our audience participation here. Next up, I have a question from Vicki, also about mentors, but she wanted to know the difference between mentors and sponsors, and cited Diane Swank of Grant Thornton, gave a powerful statement at a business breakfast years ago about women needing sponsors versus just a mentor. Any examples or any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a great question, or a great point. Yeah, I don't know that specific discussion from Grant Thornton, but we all need individuals in an organization to follow. We all need individuals that we can emulate. We all need individuals that we can say, I've been in your wake and I can follow, you. And that can happen as a minority, as a divergent thinker in an organization oftentimes needs that because they're going across the grain. There's so many underrepresented groups in an organization. You need someone to follow. And so I love the word sponsor. It's a word I don't use personally, but it makes a ton of sense. And I think that if you can find that and grab it and hold on to it, I would highly recommend it. But what's interesting is it doesn't have to be within your organization. You can go out there and seek outside your organization. For everyone listening to this, I highly recommend that you go find through LinkedIn or any other networking group someone else and basically grab their coattails. And it's remarkable how a simple phone call or email or LinkedIn message, people are so open to those conversations and say, here's how I fought through that battle, and you're welcome to learn from some of the things I've done.
Perfect, thank you. So just wanting to acknowledge we are right at 9 o'clock. So if you do need to jump off for another meeting this morning, we are recording today's session, so you can have access to hear the rest of Jay's questions. Jay, do you have a few more minutes to answer a few more we had come in?
I do. Absolutely.
All right, perfect, thank you. All right, so we'll move on. A couple questions more about self-reflection. So one thing JD had wondered, do you have a self-talk track to, kind of walk you through the days when you can't really get forth the energy to do what you need to do, even though your success and your growth is tied to you actually taking action? Like, how do you self-motivate?
Yeah, it's really hard. It is very lonely at the top. I know that's a proverbial statement, but it truly is, because no one truly understands the emotion and the business that you're carrying on your shoulders except for yourself. So it is really hard. I do not have a talk track. I do journal a lot. I find retrospective as important as kind of introspective or kind of forward thinking. So end of day, writing down your appreciations, writing down some key learnings, I find it very cathartic and very helpful. And then to actually go back and read that on occasion also provides, hey, you know what, that was a tough spot, but I made it through. I can do that again. So I find journaling to be incredibly important. And for those that do journal, get a paper and pen and journal. Don't do it online. There's just something hardwired in our brains to kind of slow down and use the mechanics of our body to actually write. It is so much more fulfilling. At least for me, that's my recommendation. So I find that journaling is also great. And then the other thing that I try to do is definitely very regimented in my daily routine. I generally wake up. I do exercise in the morning, pretty much every morning. I do eat well. I try to go to sleep at the same time. I do go for walks when necessary. And that also is incredibly important. And you hear about this in the popular media, and so I can't even speak about it from a physiological point of view, but from an emotional and brain clutter, it's incredibly impactful and really gets me into the right mindset.
Perfect. So when you look, you mentioned earlier that TopstepTrader has 6 values. Which one for you is occasionally the most challenging to practice or to practice well?
The one that's easiest for me is the well-being of our team. So we believe in the well-being of the team, and we do that through emotional and physical support. So that one's the easiest. Actually, the hardest one is that empowerment one that I spoke of earlier, where we believe empowered people yield great results. And that's because at times I do have to be directive, and I hate crossing that line. But as I mentioned before, if you can communicate the rationale as to why you are being directive, it typically goes well. We live that empowerment by each and every role in our organization has an entire list of accountabilities. It's not to the individual, but it's to that role. And so I know what every role in our organization is accountable for. And so I can go to, Jim or Dick or Harry or whoever it might be and say, I know you're accountable for this, and here's why it's important, but it's not getting done. And here's some suggestions to actually improve upon it. And so I hate crossing that line, but if you can communicate as to why, that's the one that is the most challenging.
Thank you, Scott, for that question. And that actually dovetails into one Victoria had. She wanted to know, measuring, so since you're talking about the accountability of people, since you got a team working from home, is there such a thing as overtime? Like, how do you know that the team is really putting in the time where they need to be? So it sounds like accountability plays into that, but do you have any other expectations setting, parameters or things that you do for your team?
Well, it starts in the very beginning into whom you hire. Like, you have to hire the best. There's just no doubt about it. So if you hire the best individuals, they're going to be the ones that are self-motivated to ensure that their work gets done and that they are living up to their accountabilities. We do not use tooling for time tracking. We do work our business in 2-week sprints. The sprint concept is very well known in the technology world, where there's a scrum, and then there's a 2-week sprint, and then there's a retrospective, et cetera. We do that across all of our organization. We do that in the marketing department. We do it in our product department. And what that does is it allows you to chunk up the work to the point at which, did we deliver against expectations? And so we can basically say, this is our belief system about the amount of work that we can get done in the next 2 weeks. At the end of the 2 weeks, we evaluate and retrospect, and we basically say yes or no, and then we have learnings based on that. So we are not requiring an individual to basically put in 40 hours or 50 hours or 30 hours or whatever else. We're requiring them to get done the work that's required in those 2-week sprints. And that really works out really well. If I can dovetail this conversation into the work from anywhere philosophy that we spoke of earlier, we're also seriously contemplating moving to a 4-day work week. We've talked about it. We've socialized it a little bit within the organization. We're still evaluating it, but we do know that this online work is exhausting. It's not only exhausting because you're staring at a screen all day long, but it's exhausting because you're not having that, again, emotional and physicality with your teammates that, is kind of a stress relief and the opportunity, around the proverbial water cooler. And so we're contemplating, what if we did, a 4-day work week? And what's really interesting is we reached out to our network of, peer organizations and said, are you doing this? Have you contemplated it? What success stories have you learned? We haven't found anyone that really is doing it currently. And we were surprised. We thought this was more common than otherwise. I know in Europe it's done fairly frequently, but we do believe that in the well-being of the team, the 4-day work week might be the answer to this.
A huge step forward, I think, just thinking about that. All right, one question. We've got 2 questions left. And then Jay, there's one question that's a little more pointed about marketing. I'm actually going to put you in touch with that person because I think there's some great synergies there. So Karen, just know I did see your question, but I'm going to have Jay answer that offline because I think it's a longer conversation. So our second to last question, Kathy asked, I know diversity is a big passion for you and your staff. Can you talk about that initiative, how you got it started and where you're at now?
Oh yeah, great question, and one that we're all learning as we go here. We know that it's a long journey and we have a whole lot of history that we're pushing up against and trying to address. So we recognize, first of all, you can measure diversity in so many ways, right? And we do, when you walk around, there's explicit diversity where you can see, people of color, you can see, different genders, but then there's also a lot of internal characteristics of diversity that you might not understand, people who identify in a different gender than, what's exhibited. And so we had to start to measure what diversity is in our organization. So the very first thing we did was we actually sent out a survey and basically said, and it's one that's, I think, well practiced. It wasn't questions we created. We modified them slightly, but we basically asked, I don't know, it was like 25, 30 different questions about how you identified. We needed a baseline. We need to understand who is in our organization. It's remarkable how telling and open and transparent people are, especially if it's anonymous. But we can quickly understand, how people are inside and not just outside. So that established the baseline, and we realized that we were deficient in certain characteristics of diversity. The next thing that we had to do was we have to fix this by hiring a diverse employee pool. And the way to do that is you have to get in front of diverse candidates. You can't just use all the same techniques that you have historically relied on to find your next employee. And so what we started to do was say, well, where are these diverse candidates that we needed to be at? And that's really hard. It's hard to figure out where, the people of color or the women entrepreneurs are or whatever. There's lots of organizations out in the community that will try to help you identify these diverse candidates, but you have to go seek them. But once you do, they're incredibly cooperative and incredibly willing. So we have only gone that far in our journey. We basically established the baseline, determined what we wanted to accomplish, and started to try to get in front of diverse candidates. We have so much more work to do. we have to start ensuring that we hire appropriately against these metrics that we've established. We have to ensure that they feel inclusive in our organization. We have to ensure that they share with their communities about getting others into part of our business. Like, there's so much more work to do, but we are building the foundation and taking small steps forward. And this has all happened in the last probably 18 to 24 months. So I'm proud of all we've accomplished, but boy, we have a lot more work to do.
Well, speaking of work to be done, our last question is, obviously, Jay, you have shared a lot today. You have, as we said, kind of that, entrepreneurial, go get 'em spirit. You are a mentor. You are involved in so many things. So how do you balance your passion and your work life with your family life?
My children are a little older now, so they're teenagers, so they don't want me in their life in any way. So that's pretty easy. But during the early years, the beauty of entrepreneurialism is that you're working all the time, but you get to choose which hours you're always working. So there was many hours, many weekends, many long nights where you are working. But when your kid has, I don't know, a band performance in 3rd grade, you can stop work and go to that. Your mind's always reeling about all the work that you still have to do, but at least you can be centered in that moment and try to participate. So there's the pros associated with the flexible schedule. The cons is that you are always working. So you definitely have to have a high energy store to draw upon, because there are going to be many hours at which others are drawing a paycheck and sitting at home while you are working.
Perfect. Well, Jay, thank you so much. Dan and Mary Kay, a wonderful job as always. I personally enjoy getting to watch your banter. I miss that from our in-person sessions. And thank you to every one of you who participated today. I am looking at the chat function and seeing so many positive comments of people who tuned in either for the first time or just really getting that Friday morning dose of inspiration to, end the week on a really positive note. So thank you, Jay, for everything you shared with us this morning.
My pleasure.
So as we look ahead, as I mentioned at the beginning of today's session, this is officially our last session for the 2019-2020 season, which is hard to believe. So as we say, see you next season, which will hopefully start in the fall, and depending on CDC guidelines and where our world takes us, we're hoping to be able to meet in person again. So we'll continue to communicate through email and the EBC social media channels to give you more information. I did want to share a few quick things just as we close today. Please watch for the recording. We will be sending that out via email and also posting it on ebcmorning.com. So you can rewatch Jay's session today or share it with a friend or a colleague you feel would really benefit from today's message. We'll also be providing some other opportunities throughout the summer to stay connected. So please stay tuned. We will be restarting our LinkedIn forums. There is a current group up there right now for the EBC, so feel free to join. I will get you added in there. And then after today's session, we'll start adding questions so people can communicate over the summer. For those of you who are actual paying members of our EBC, thank you for your continued support. I will be sending out a message to you guys here in the next 1 to 2 weeks with more information on a few more communication things we'll be doing to get restarted. And stay tuned for some other very exciting things. Our EBC Council is meeting early next week, and so after that, we'll have some more information to share on the direction of our organization as we continue through this shelter in place and just very trying and changing economic times. But excited to still continue our mission of having transformational leaders connecting in order to become their best version of themselves. So we will continue to find new ways to do that in our virtual world and look forward to sharing all of those with you in the next days to come. So with that, I'd like to thank everyone this morning. Again, thank you, Jay, Mary Kay, and Dan. Thank you to everyone, and wonderful Friday wishes to all of you. So thank you and have a great day.